The moment this girl's parents met their daughter's boyfriend, they instantly made up their minds about him. Their girl always looked presentable, but her chosen partner was a homeless man who did not belong. At least that was what they thought. Little did they know that this man was hiding a huge secret. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our upcoming stories. Sarah and her boyfriend Jake, who was homeless at the time, met a little over a year before their eventual wedding day, and shortly after their first date, the day came when he had to meet Sarah's parents. It was a nervous moment, and one that did not go smoothly, to say the least. They had arranged a dinner party at Sarah's parents' home. Sarah had not told them much about Jake's living situation because she worried they would otherwise judge prematurely. Sarah hoped her folks would be open-minded and see beyond her boyfriend's rough exterior, but that hope faded the moment Jake stepped over his in-laws' doorstep. He smiled and reached out his hand to shake theirs. He introduced himself and was nothing but polite the entire time. But the moment Sarah's parents saw Jake's filthy appearance, alarm bells started to ring in their brains. They did not shake his hand back and never stated their names. Instead, they instantly asked about his work and living situation in a judgmental way. Given the look of his attire, they had little hope for a positive answer. But when Jake stated that he was homeless, a sense of shock filled their hearts. Sarah's parents were speechless and looked at the friendly but filthy young man with disgust in their eyes. But Mom and Dad, there is so much more to Jake than you think. Sarah's parents figured that their daughter only said those words to force a nice response. During dinner time, Sarah's parents played nice, mostly for their daughter's sanity. They even introduced themselves as Ron and Emily. But that one moment of pleasantness was quickly canceled out by all the months that followed. Ron and Emily turned their backs on Sarah and her disgusting boyfriend the moment they left that night. Every time their daughter and her boyfriend came over, they were forced to turn away. Jake wasn't welcome in their home anymore. Her parents became distant and repeatedly tried to convince Sarah to end the relationship. "He's not good enough for you, baby girl. Why do you even like him?" But Sarah paid their hurtful words no mind. And then, about 10 months after that first family dinner, the biggest shock for Ron and Emily arrived. It came in the mail, an invitation to their daughter's wedding. Emily saw how Ron's face filled up red with anger. This has to stop. Emily couldn't agree more. They knew speaking to Sarah was pointless. So instead, they made a pact to sabotage their wedding by any means necessary. Before Ron and Emily knew it, the day of their daughter's wedding arrived. It was a nice warm day in May, and the wedding location was beautiful. Ron and Emily walked up to the venue with aching pain in their hearts. They wanted a happy daughter, but marrying a homeless man didn't offer her stability. The wedding venue was massive. It took place at a private estate with a large mansion in the middle. Both the outside grounds and the house were part of the wedding, in case rain took over. Our daughter probably paid for all this and ransacked her bank account. It's not like Jake can afford it. While walking in the outer part of the garden, both parents were almost instantly greeted by their daughter and Jake. She was already wearing her wedding dress, and Jake still needed to put on his tuxedo. Cleary, because the way he presented himself now was like the Jake they knew, filthy and rugged. The two parents made one last verbal effort to prevent the wedding from happening. And it was a big one. "Sarah, if you go through with this, we consider you disinherited. We cannot look on from the sidelines any longer, girl." Ron said these hurtful words with a raised voice, but somehow, Sarah already expected her father to speak these words. She even had a response ready. She found it sad that her parents kept viewing their relationship this way, and she and Jake were ready to give them one last chance to change their minds. Sarah nodded toward Jake, who pulled out an envelope. Jake handed the paper package to his parents-in-law and took over speaking. With the following words, he turned the table on them. "If you want me to be your son-in-law, then follow the instructions inside this envelope. If you don't, the same fate goes for you. We will disinherit you," Jake said. Jake and Sarah didn't say another word and simply walked away together, leaving her parents behind, dazed and confused. Emily looked at her husband, who now held the mysterious envelope in his hand. "What does he mean, honey? Why would this one envelope make us want him as our son-in-law?" But as you might expect, curiosity won this battle. Ron opened the envelope while still watching his daughter walk around the corner of the house. The piece of paper indeed detailed a set of instructions, but to the unknowing mind, it made no real sense. "What is this?" Ron said loudly. Sarah's mother curiously read the note as well while looking in from behind Ron's shoulder. The instructions were as follows: "Follow my commands and find out the truth. To get you started, go to the large tree on the property and dig deep to find the thing you're looking for." Ron found this whole ordeal irritating. A minute ago they were making demands, and now they were playing some stupid riddle game conjured by a homeless man? No, not me. Ron was about to throw the instruction list away, but his wife stopped him before he could. "The ceremony does not start for an hour, so it's not like we have anything better to do in the meantime. Aren't you just the tiniest bit curious about where this leads?" Emily's explanation did seem to make sense, even to Ron. "All right, honey." It was time to figure out where this note would lead them. Together, they searched the property and quickly found the largest tree. It was a tall oak that was well over 60 feet in size, and before it stood a shovel with its spade already halfway buried into the ground. This must be it. Ron looked at his wife, unsure what to do next. But Emily had already decided. They needed to dig a hole, just like the slightly cryptic instruction told them to do. Ron respected his wife's wishes and dug a narrow but deep hole until he hit something hard. Jake suddenly became a lot more mysterious because after removing the remaining soil with his hands, Ron was holding a small wooden box. The lid of the container was opened, and inside were 2 items. These items would make sweat drip down on both their foreheads. One item was a picture. It showed them a phone picture of Jake and Sarah smiling while having dinner at a restaurant. The back side of the picture had some text on it. "This is where we had our first date. And here is your tip because you raised a lovely daughter." Ron nervously opened the second package, an envelope. Inside that envelope he found a large stack of money. It contained well over $10,000. Both parents turned pale instantly. Where did all that money come from? It was addressed to them, but what did they deserve to receive all this money? And how did Jake get it in the first place? The final $100 bill had some writing on it, and the words formed a follow-up instruction for Ron and Emily: "Go to the main bedroom of the house to get your final answer." By now, both Ron and Emily were thoroughly intrigued, and together they quickly went to the main house on the property. The front door was already open since the house was part of the wedding. They asked cleaning staff where they could find the master bedroom, and after following their instructions, they saw it a large room with a bed in the middle. In the center of its sheets lay a floral wreath. "What kind of sick game is this boy playing?" Ron blurted out, slightly irritated. The floral wreath looked like something one would lay on a coffin after a family member died, so seeing it laid out for them felt a bit morbid. Emily said nothing this time and simply walked silently to the floral arrangement. Emily reached out her hand and grabbed an item that was placed in the middle of the floral arrangement. It was again a photo, but this one was framed nicely, and the people in it were unknown to both parents. It portrayed a grown man and woman, and in the middle stood a small child. They were all formally dressed and stared at the camera with stern expressions. Emily looked at the backside of the picture frame since the last photo also had a message on the back. There, she found a folded up letter with a long written message, clearly in a man's handwriting. And that's when everything became clear. It was written by Jake and addressed to Jake and Emily directly. It even mentioned their names at the top. Ron and Emily read the letter in silence, and when they did, it didn't take long for tears to form in their eyes. The letter made them see their son-in-law in a whole new way. "How could someone do this to a child?" Emily said to her husband while in full tears. The story written out before them was heartbreaking, but what made it even sadder was that they were about to do the same thing to the child in this letter. Even Ron was visibly affected by the letter. After finishing the letter, Ron and Emily both agreed that they had made a huge mistake. They folded up the letter and left the house as humbled individuals. And this exit was just in time because the ceremony was about to start in the garden. A choir sang, and a harp player played a beautiful tune while Jake waited at the altar for his bride. This time he was sharply dressed, and Emily, who judged him from the start, even stated that he looked good. Jake smiled as he saw his bride-to-be arrive at the end of the aisle. His smile broadened even further when he saw who was escorting her. It was Ron, the man who had detested him ever since they first met. Sarah's father had a careful smile as he guided his daughter to the altar where Jake stood. Clearly, the letter worked because now he presented his daughter gladly. Ron positioned his daughter next to his son-in-law and told him to take good care of his girl. The ceremony could now start, but Ron wouldn't take a seat before hugging Jake intensely first. It was a heartfelt moment, one that indicated acceptance and respect, and everyone would soon find out why. After Ron released Jake, the groom nodded and asked his new family member to sit down beside his wife in the front row. Ron obliged, and both parents looked on in pride at the situation before them. But what changed? What was in the letter that could have caused this type of turnaround? All these questions were answered in the vows. Sarah's spoken words were full of love and a promise to be eternally faithful to the love of her life. Jake's vows portrayed the same message for the most part, but there was a second act in his speech which held a special message for everyone present. Jake tapped his microphone twice and turned toward his in-laws in the front row. "The following words I have prepared for the two of you, and you've earned them because you followed my instructions perfectly. You deserve to hear the explanation to that letter coming from me live right now. As you might have guessed from the story in that letter, I was not always a homeless man. My family owns this mansion and everything you see. Well, it belonged to my parents. My folks were very wealthy, and I was born with that money. But there was a problem with that. With all of that money, expectation was never far removed. My parents demanded a lot from me. Throughout my childhood, and especially when I was an adult, they stated that I wasn't living up to their standards. Whatever I did, it was never enough for them. And one day, that pressure got out of hand. Without any lead-up, my mother and father suddenly kicked me out of the family home and put me on the street. They gave me no tools to survive independently and cut off all ties, not just for the money, but also for contact with them. I felt abandoned while being in desperate need of love. And that's when I made a promise to myself. Whenever I found a new family, I wanted them to accept me for me, not for the money in my pocket. Money and greed destroys, but true love and acceptance binds. And then, out of nowhere, I met the love of my life, Sarah. She met me while I was begging in the street for food. My sleeping arrangements were close to where she worked, and Sarah passed by several times a day because of it. We eventually got to talking and hit it off. She of course paid for our first few dates. But then something bizarre happened. About a month after Sarah and I started dating, I received a phone call from my father's notary. It seemed that my parents both perished in a car accident, which was sad, of course. But my father's will also stated they left their entire inheritance in my name. I was suddenly rich beyond belief. But to ensure that you would like me for my personality and not my money, I chose to keep my homeless facade going. Whenever I met you, I dressed poorly and pretended to live on your daughter's salary. You never fully accepted me back then, but I do realize the flaw in my plan. You simply acted out of protectiveness for your daughter. You wanted the best for her, and that quickly became clear to me. I understand that. That type of thinking is a sharp contrast to how my parents treated me. That's why today is so important. It showed me that you are great people, and therefore I want you as my parents-in-law if you will still have me after this weird test. Ron and Emily wiped away their tears and stood up. They, of course, agreed to accept him and hugged him intently. The marriage was successful, and Luke finally had a family that loved him. A few months later, they visited the grave site of his biological parents together. It was an emotional visit since it was the first time Luke went by, but he drew comfort from the fact that he wasn't alone. He was with a family he chose and a family that chose him back. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable tale like this one.